On the night of March 8, 2014, 239 people boarded an airplane in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Some were heading home. Some were traveling for work. Some were on vacation. There were families, couples, and solo travelers. There were 20 children on board. They had bags packed, plans made, and people waiting for them at the other end. The plane took off just after midnight. The aircraft was a Boeing 777, one of the safest planes ever built. 40 minutes later, the plane disappeared. Not crashed, not diverted, not forced to land somewhere unexpected. Disappeared. And despite the largest, most expensive search operation in aviation history, involving dozens of countries, hundreds of ships and aircraft, and over $1 billion spent, the plane has never been fully found. The people on board have never come home. What actually happened that night remains, more than a decade later, one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the modern world. The flight was completely routine right up until it was not. MH370 departed Kuala Lumpur International Airport heading northeast toward Beijing, China. The captain was Zahari Ahmad Shah, a highly experienced pilot with nearly 20,000 hours of flying time and over 30 years with Malaysia Airlines. By every account, he was dedicated, professional, and deeply skilled. For the first 40 minutes, everything was normal. Air traffic controllers tracked the plane without any concern. The crew communicated clearly. The aircraft climbed to cruising altitude and headed out over the South China Sea toward Vietnamese airspace. Then, at 1:19 in the morning, the co-pilot made the last radio contact from the aircraft. The words were completely ordinary, a standard sign-off as the plane prepared to enter Vietnamese airspace. Good night, Malaysian 370. 1 minute later, the plane's transponder was switched off. MH370 vanished from civilian radar. When Vietnamese controllers realized the plane had not checked in, they contacted Malaysia. Malaysia contacted the airline. The airline tried reaching the crew by radio. Nobody got through. For a few hours there was confusion rather than full alarm. Communication problems, while unusual, occasionally happen. Controllers assumed a technical issue would resolve itself. They expected the plane to reappear on radar or land at an alternate airport. It did not. By morning, Malaysia Airlines announced the plane was missing. Ships and aircraft from over 20 countries rushed to search the South China Sea, the last place MH370 had been seen on radar. They found nothing, not a single piece of debris, not a life jacket, not a seat cushion. Then investigators discovered something that completely changed everything. A British satellite company called Inmarsat had been quietly receiving automatic electronic signals from MH370 long after the transponder went dark. These signals, called handshakes, are routine technical pings that aircraft send to satellites simply to maintain a connection. They carry almost no data and contain no location information in the normal sense. But Inmarsat's engineers realized something remarkable. By studying tiny variations in the frequency of these signals, caused by the movement of the plane relative to the satellite, it was complex mathematics applied to data that had never been used this way before. What they found was astonishing. After disappearing from radar over the South China Sea, MH370 had turned. It flew back across the Malay Peninsula. It crossed into the Indian Ocean. And based on the final handshake signal received at 8:19 in the morning, more than 7 hours after takeoff, the plane had ended its journey somewhere in the remote southern Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from where everyone had been searching. The entire search operation relocated to one of the most isolated stretches of ocean on Earth. A place so remote, so deep, and so poorly mapped that even sending submarines there presented enormous technical challenges. The search that followed was breathtaking in scale and heartbreaking in result. Over the following years, vessels equipped with the most advanced underwater technology in the world combed tens of thousands of square kilometers of ocean floor. They discovered underwater mountains and ancient volcanoes that science had never documented. They mapped parts of the seabed that no human had ever seen. They did not find the plane. Then in July 2015, something washed ashore on a small island called Réunion in the western Indian Ocean. It was a piece of aircraft wing, a component called a flaperon. Analysis confirmed it came from a Boeing 777. Further analysis confirmed it came specifically from MH370. Over the following years, more than 30 pieces of debris were found on beaches across the western Indian Ocean and the east coast of Africa. Each piece confirmed the same thing. The plane had broken apart in the southern Indian Ocean, and ocean currents had slowly carried fragments westward over months and years. The crash was confirmed. But the main wreckage, the fuselage, the engines, the flight recorders, has never been found. Without the black boxes, the most important question cannot be answered with certainty. Why did this happen? Investigators and aviation experts have spent years examining the evidence. The most widely accepted explanation is that the plane was deliberately diverted by someone in the cockpit. The reasoning is specific and technical. The transponder was switched off manually. It does not turn itself off. The plane then flew a path that required active navigation, making deliberate course changes that took it toward one of the most remote and unsearchable places on the planet. Only the captain or the co-pilot could realistically have done this. Investigations into both men found no clear motive. Zahari's family and colleagues described him as a dedicated, deeply professional pilot who loved flying. Investigators found he had practiced routes over the southern Indian Ocean on his home flight simulator, but this finding alone proved nothing, as simulator enthusiasts commonly experiment with unusual routes. No note was ever found. No final message was ever sent. No explanation was ever offered. Other theories have been seriously considered. A sudden catastrophic mechanical failure, but the plane flew for 7 more hours after disappearing, making total mechanical failure very difficult to explain. A fire or sudden loss of cabin pressure that incapacitated everyone on board. Possible, but this would not explain the deliberate course changes that followed. Hijacking by a passenger, but no passenger has ever been credibly identified as capable of flying the aircraft. Every theory has serious problems. No single explanation fits all the known facts perfectly. The truth is locked inside black boxes sitting somewhere on the bottom of the ocean, 4 kilometers underwater, in total darkness. For the families of those on board, the absence of answers created a kind of grief that most people will never experience and cannot fully imagine. Normal grief, as devastating as it is, eventually has something to hold on to. A confirmed moment of loss, a body, a funeral, something the mind can slowly begin to process and accept. The families of MH370 were given none of that. For years, many held on to the hope that their loved ones might somehow still be alive. Malaysian authorities declared all passengers and crew officially deceased in January 2015. But without bodies, without a crash site, without any explanation, the declaration felt empty to many families. Some refused to accept it. Some have spent years pushing governments and the airline for answers, funding independent research, and demanding that the search continue. Their grief has no clean ending. And that, perhaps more than anything else about this story, is the cruelest part of all. MH370 changed aviation permanently. International authorities introduced new requirements for tracking commercial aircraft over oceans. Planes must now transmit their position every minute. The gap in the system that allowed a passenger jet to fly untracked for 7 hours has been closed. But the plane itself is still out there. The black boxes are still on the ocean floor, slowly degrading with each passing year. The answers they contain may never be recovered. In 2024, a new search mission was proposed using the latest generation of underwater drones. The search has continued in fits and starts, driven by families who refuse to stop asking and investigators who believe the answers are still findable, if the search can be directed to the right patch of ocean. The disappearance of MH370 is not just an aviation mystery. It is a reminder that the world is still larger, deeper, and more unknowable than we like to believe. That in the age of satellites and smartphones and real-time tracking of almost everything, a plane carrying 239 people can simply vanish, and stay vanished. 10 years later, the ocean is still keeping its secret. And somewhere in the dark, 4 kilometers below the surface, the answers are waiting.